Welcome to the show, Poppy. How are you?
Hi, Tom. I'm really well. How are you?
Yeah, going well today. It's a lovely Friday. It's bloody freezing today this morning. I feel like I've done the dash this morning, dropping kids off, and here we are, nice and early, chatting with you. I'm sure you're in the same boat, being school holidays.
Yep, exactly the same boat, Juggle Town. But
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
nice to be able to have a little bit more time with them, which I also enjoy too.
absolutely, absolutely. It's kind of topical thinking around that and the juggle, and also today's we're going to be talking about resilience, and especially interested in kind of that idea of encouraging people to lean into that, but also how to expose yourself to resilience building sort of exercises and activities. So I've noticed, especially in the last couple of years, Poppy, that through the last couple of years for everyone, it's been tricky and challenging. And whilst we're not meant to compare ourselves to others, we kind of, well, I certainly have, and it's not a great thing to be doing. Is to be checking out how other people have coped through, these challenging times. But it's sort of human nature to do that. What I did notice though is that some people seem to do really well through challenging times. They're able to push through, perhaps, or they'll have setbacks and they keep going. But when you compare yourself to others, it's kind of like, oh, maybe I'm not as resilient as the next person. Probably where I'm getting going with this is with first question really would be just from your area of expertise, do people have better resilience than others naturally? Is it sort of something that is wired in when they're young, or is it something that is it like a learned thing?
Yeah, so I think it's a really good point, Tom. It can be a common myth that resilience really, or great resilience, is only, for the limited few that have this really strong inner strength. But look, I like to say resilience, or mental fitness, often as I call
Mm,
it, it really does live within all of us. And it's far more common and attainable than people think. It's actually a learned skill, and it grows and it grows as we expose ourselves to moments of stress and challenge, as uncomfortable as that can feel. So we actually enhance or really hinder our resilience by the habits and the mindset and the behaviors that we choose to adopt each day. And I also say resilience isn't actually just about bouncing back from setback. It's actually an outlook that all of us are capable of cultivating to help us stay focused on what the important things are in life, rather than always like on what's most urgent, or to your point around comparing ourselves to others, or what may cause us negative emotion. And it's interesting when we're talking about, like, is resilience common? Does everyone have it? It's people who've been exposed to incredibly adverse and traumatic events actually often report a return to baseline happiness in the weeks and the months after the circumstance. And Christopher Reeves, who I love this story, who's a lot of people will know, who's a quadriplegic and had a terrible horse riding accident. He actually reported 12 months after his accident that he'd actually returned to and improved his baseline level of happiness.
wow.
Yeah, which is really interesting to go to show that we are all more resilient than we think. And likewise, like September 11 attacks in the US, right? There's thousands of people were interviewed who were directly impacted by that event. And for the majority of them, some weeks after that event, they actually also returned to what was deemed a baseline functioning, even in the week after these, horrific event. And I think the point here is life goes on, right? It goes on around us every day, both good and bad, stressful, happy, and it's always and often unhappy, and it's always changing. And I think for every great experience, there's always going to be a harder one around the corner. And when we run hard and are willing to open ourselves to the harder stuff and experience the harder stuff, this is actually shaping the resilience that each of us hold.
Mm.
We don't want to expose ourselves to trauma and tragedy all the time. I mean, that is an analogy, but it's reality too, but it's the analogy of we can be exposed to tough stuff in our life, and it's resilient building, and it does us a lot of good. And I'm sure, Tom, you've probably faced tricky situations at work or in your life, and at the time it felt, hard, tricky, overwhelming. And it was probably on hindsight that you realized perhaps some of the growth and the strength that came from that challenging time. Is there any experience you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, funnily enough, I was speaking with my colleague, Josh, my business partner, actually yesterday, and we are just reflecting because it's the end of financial year, well, as of yesterday, just a bit of a reflection for both of us. But if we go back 5 years, so my business, Pinnacle Health Group's been around for about 12 years. But if you go back 5 years, it would have been that rapid growth period for, let's say, 7 years, where we just kept going and going and going to the point that things weren't so we were growing for growth's sake in some ways. On reflection, anyway, at the time it was all go go go. So with that came a lot of challenges, and also just we were also saying yesterday, just we're still quite, I guess, young in our business journey in terms of my age. I'm 38. So we were kind of just saying like at the pace that we were going, firstly it was unsustainable to keep going that way. We were sort of acting as if we were trying to fit 20 years into the first 7 years. But what it led to basically was a bit of a point where, well, I had a actual a trip to Perth for a family holiday, which this is actually, I call it kind of my wake up moment. But I went to Perth for a family holiday, and because I'd been running around like an idiot flying up to Sydney every so often, I basically went into burnout. I went on a family holiday and I was sick for the whole time, and I was in bed for most of those days. I think 5 out of the 7 days. So with that came a lot of guilt in terms of not being a great, right there for that family holiday and being present, because my body was completely out of sync and completely stressed. And I guess what I'm getting at with that example is that was a real breaking point, I guess, in some ways. And when I came back to Melbourne for getting back into work, I deliberately slowed down, and I slowed down everything that happened from there from a business perspective, but also personally. So, but the reason for sharing that is because, like, that was really hard times for me personally, just in all facets, mental health, stress, physically, all of those things. And I think, and also I felt like a bit of a fraud in some ways, because we're running a wellbeing business, and I was probably at my feeling the least healthy from all the different elements of wellbeing perspective. So, but yeah, on reflection, like that was, say, 5 years ago, and really things have been going quite nicely from that point. But I kind of think if I didn't have that moment, or I didn't push through, then or maybe not pushing through, but if I didn't have that insight at the time to make a change, then I've learnt from that. So that's really, in my head, that's like a defining moment, and also an example of resilience, because we sort of troubleshooted my way through it. So yeah, that's a personal example of mine.
It's a great story, and I think you raise a really good point too about the importance of being aware of when you are going over the edge, because I think too often we don't do ourselves, any service by wrapping up this negative emotion we may feel, be it stress or worry or overwhelm. And, your case, you obviously are head down, bum up, and off you go, and you keep going and you keep going and you keep going. But when we're not consciously aware of the impact that negative emotion is having on us, and we, brush it down, or we don't label it, it's actually very hard. It makes it harder for us to actually reframe the negativity that we're feeling. And yeah, we know, from a mindset point of view, that doesn't leave us feeling great. And from a wellbeing and a self-care point of view, yeah, it can leave you in a heap. So just even being aware of that emotion, I think for you, like, the amazing learning and opportunity was, that you've recognized that. But I think too, equally, you've gone through a challenging time that no doubt has been, probably those aspects that were beneficial too, that have exposed you to the stresses of and demands of building a business. And that has also set you up to be able to, yes, reassess and recraft your direction, but do it in a way too that is more resilient. You probably have built greater inner strength and more awareness of what you need and where you need to go. So sometimes those bad experiences actually lead to really great outcomes. And look where you are now. So definitely get out.
I'm in my son's bedroom, in his messy bedroom. That's where I am. No, and I think naturally as well, just an observation, Poppy, I might be going a bit off track here, but if you go through the last couple of years, there's been this idea of post-traumatic growth, like where people from a couple of years of a pandemic, that people have come out clearer with their values of what they really want, and then they're maybe making some changes around that to suit what they want. But I also think on the other spectrum, there's this natural thing where people don't, in some ways, they're looking for complete comfort. So what's the most comfortable thing I can do right now because I've been stressed. And I think in some ways, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think aiming for comfort in all facets means that, in my head anyway, you're kind of missing some learnings because you're not getting into that perfect like stress performance kind of sweet spot.
Absolutely. I mean, from a performance point of view, you're right. It's, if we want to be sort of high performing and at our highest well-being, an element of stress and an element of out of our comfort zone is healthy. An element of having some stress and anxiety at lower levels is actually healthy for us. And I think a lot of people are terrified of, and me included, often, like I feel like, I'm running away from something because it just, it feels too hard basket. It feels like it could be quite overwhelming. But it's actually those moments that we do really need to proactively build our resilience. And I think that's the bit when you are feeling uncomfortable about facing the uncomfortable, just think about, what is the worst thing that could happen? What am I actually going to gain? And how am I going to grow if I proactively or step into this challenging situation? And they are the golden moments that we can proactively build our resilience and set us up for high performance and better well-being.
Yeah, that's great. And I think another great question you said at the start there is the question of what are you running away from? I think that's quite a good one for a lot of people, just to go, well, because as soon as you ask yourself that, you can actually identify specifically what is it. It might be, fear, perhaps, of fear of failure is often a common one here. So yeah, that's really great. For women, I guess if we talk a little bit more around women here, specifically those that are getting into either leadership or perhaps they're focusing on career growth. What are some of the practical things that they can do to sort of add those, moments of resilience building into their everyday? And funnily enough, my wife's just ran out the door with my kids, and I know she's got a busy day ahead of her, and I've always got her in my head as that example of someone who's doing a lot, So for someone like that, what are some of those practical things that they can do in their day?
Yeah, coming back to the being comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? So if we must actually teach ourselves that we can create moments for ourselves that make us face that uncomfortable and build that resilience. And it's almost like the analogy of like you have to teach a skydiver, right, how to land before they jump from the plane. And it's a little bit the same with resilience, right? We have to teach ourselves how to be uncomfortable. So I would say the number one is we need to think about exposing ourselves to stresses. So women want in positions of leadership or wanting to lean into leadership, like actually thinking about how can I put myself in a situation that's going to make me feel a bit uncomfortable and expose me to some stresses that are going to really actually enhance my resilience over the long run. Most people do want to run a mile from any sort of stress-inducing, anxiety-provoking situation. And leadership is definitely, can be one of those situations. But interesting, I also say our physiological toughness is actually very linked to our mental toughness and our resilience. And it's been strongly linked in physiological and mental during any experiences in our life. So, for example, people who swim in cold water actually have increased spikes in adrenaline, Tom, which I'm sure you're probably aware of as well. And when their adrenaline is then measured during or after stressful experiences, these individuals also show those same rapid spikes in adrenaline. So we know adrenaline spikes tend to enhance performance, especially in anxiety-fueled times. So that is just a very like a practical example. Not everyone's going to go and throw themselves in cold water, but finding even physiological opportunities to put your body under stress actually benefits us mentally and is building our resilience. Is there any stresses, Tom, that you expose yourself to?
Well, yeah, I kind of think, the breath work and the cold exposure therapy. There's a great episode on our podcast with Reese Peluso, who's got a community called Our Breath Collective. So that's a really great one for anyone that's interested in learning a bit more about cold therapy exposure and the breath work as well. But for stresses, for me, my thing, and it might sound cliche and kind of standard from someone who's a physio as well, is really just my exercise routine. So in the morning, like I went this morning, 6 a.m. did a workout, and it's stress in the morning, stressful to do it, but because I do it at least 4 times a week, it's routine for me. But each time it is that perfect bit of stress, and then I come home and I'm kind of in the zone for my day. But it is, especially in the cold, like it was freezing this morning, so it's like, gee, the mental anguish to get out of bed to get to this this HIIT class was there. But as soon as I get back from that, I'm like, that might be the hardest thing I've done for the day. So therefore, good on you, Tom. You can probably face everything else that you've got on your plate today. So I instantly am a better person for that, and a better parent, which is really my number one priority. And obviously, work's important for me as well. So yeah, that's probably the one where it's a physical stressor, if you like. Yeah.
Well, that physical exercise essentially is actually when you're putting your body under that duress, you're seeing that spike in adrenaline. And funnily enough, when your mind or body then comes under duress during the day, you actually you've been more conditioned to see that spike in adrenaline again, which will help, obviously, as you say, your performance. And I think that the physiological or the physical activity is a great example of how people can expose themselves to stresses. I think in a practical sense, when we're talking about leadership in the workplace, I always say, because this was me very much some years ago, if you loathe public speaking, but you know it's going to get you ahead, right, in your career, especially as a woman, as a female in leadership, put your hand up to present in high pressure situations. So I use that as an example because I used to sit on the fence with that one, and I knew that I wanted to, but I was scared about it. And when we do experience stress with some sense of control and sufficient time to recover, which in this instance most people would have, we're actually helping to build a physiological response as well. So every time you publicly speak feeling terrified, you're actually gradually optimizing your future emotional response and performance, and lowering the terror, basically, every time you speak thereafter. So, yeah, exposing yourself to the uncomfortable and putting yourself under that stress and duress is actually in the background physiologically building your resilience, so that when you do that similar activity again, you're in a far better position. So the more we throw ourselves into stress, basically, the more we adapt.
I really love that one, Poppy, the public speaking. Just sort of opening up a little bit here, but my public speaking, we used to have to do it at school, and to be honest, I'd have a sick day every time, and I would avoid it. I was quite a shy kid, and so basically, going back to avoiding stress. That was me. I was too anxious to even do that. And so getting into through uni, still bad, but kind of having to try because I kind of had to, couldn't avoid it anymore. And then in a work setting, like I still am terrified with public speaking, but because I've had to do it, I have gotten better with practice. But I definitely, the heart races if I'm in front of a group, but I can get through it, and I know I'm better for it. So it's kind of an interesting one, because naturally my natural instinct is just to run and not do it. But obviously I've had a lot of practice and have exposed myself, and my mindset had to change, which was, you just have to do this, Tom. You can't avoid it. Otherwise you've got no hope of communicating what you want in a work setting, or, even in personal stuff as well.
And I love, Tom, that you just say, I have to do it. That's the other thing. Sometimes we just have to do it. Like, sometimes just picture yourself at the end of the diving board and just jump. Like, what is the worst thing that could happen? And I often say that to the people that I coach on a raft of different challenges or experiences that we're discussing. And when you actually peel back what is the worst that could happen here, often there's very few points that people come up with. And when they actually think about those points, they realize, like, it's okay, I can actually cope with that. So I guess exposing ourselves to stresses, as you've just described, it basically makes it, I view it, the public speaking, as a friendly challenge rather than a threat. What once was such a threat and so anxiety provoking for me became an uncomfortable challenge. And increasingly, the more you do it, the more I view it as, I'm just going to jump off the diving board. I'm just going to do it. What have I got to lose? And this is a bit of a friendly challenge. And your mindset does shift like that the more you expose yourself, as you've described.
Yeah, now you do that for a living, Poppy. How amazing is that?
Yes, I guess, yes. And I still sometimes have to force myself to jump off the diving board. So, does it get easier? Yes, it does. But I definitely still think it's not something. Building resilience and exposing yourself to stresses and being comfortable with the uncomfortable, I think, is a daily practice for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm glad you're saying all that, and it's and sharing your story as well there. Now, for women that are in leadership, perhaps, or they're stepping into leadership, one element of leadership, of course, is supporting others and helping them grow and also develop their own, resilience skills in a way. There's nothing better than the leader who is authentic with, everything, but also practices either resilience skills, gratitude, and self-care as well, because when you see that, you're modeling great, healthy behaviors. You've obviously had some different roles in your journey with Swiss Wellness and Qantas Group as well. Is there anything you can share from your leadership roles that you think, helped build others up? Because obviously one of the best things you can do as a leader is share all this stuff. Any examples from your end?
And I think I definitely, absolutely, I had some amazing leaders in my times with both Swiss and the Qantas Group, and other roles as well. And I think there were standout moments of people that really understood that I need to lean in and help others build their inner strength and their resilience. Some of them were just in the moment. Some things were more consciously formally done, if you like. But for me, there's probably a few things, simple things actually. Encourage people to live in the moment, right? So as a leader, I've actually always been big on, with those I've led and teams I've been in, to celebrate the here and now. So acknowledge a job well done in the moment, because the only moments that we're actually all really alive is when we're in the moment. And cultivating resilience is actually about getting people into the everyday moment and away from worrying about the things they can't control in the past or in the future. And I think as a leader, when you can, that practically means, okay, if I celebrate, a job well done, or if I celebrate where we're at now, or if we're talking about a difficult situation that we're in right now, this is actually cultivating people to live in the everyday moment. And that is a really great way to getting them away from worry and anxiety and negative emotion. So that's one thing. I think another is I always say companies are really great at having visions and purposes. But as a leader, how can you also help others find their own personal purpose and meaning too? And for each of us, that's really different. But when we can cultivate a culture that leads with curiosity and an openness to share what's meaningful and assign people to roles and tasks that provide them with that meaning and that purpose, then we're actually all at our happiest. And, you know, when we are at our happiest and we're in our flow moments, we're definitely more resilient. And I think the other thing is about building belonging and human connection. So all team members deserve to belong. Everyone's got unique opinions, unique ideas, great perspectives. And as a leader of others, I do think our role is to find opportunities for everyone to be regularly heard. And I'm reading at the moment Gail Kelly's, the ex-CEO of Westpac's book. And she says it's a brilliant book, actually. Live, Lead, Learn. Brilliant books just come out. So leaders have a job to ensure that their people are connected. This is what Gail says, especially because she says not everyone does have this unwavering natural inner strength. And when we listen to people and ask questions and check in on the small but really important things in somebody's life, and taking the time to actually genuinely connect and care with someone and ask if they're okay, to be human, basically. She's amazing at being human, to being and a very authentic leader. And she created a real culture of belonging and human connection in her leadership position at Westpac. So definitely a culture of belonging and human connection. And then the only last thing I'd say is tell people it's okay to fail. I think especially for women, we get stuck in this rabbit warren of self-criticism and self-doubt and, you know, are we good enough, and perfectionism. And as a leader, we must role model the type of behaviours that allow everyone to lean in and know that no matter what, the team has your back and that we can share great ideas. We can risk ourselves putting great ideas out. And if it doesn't work out, it's okay. Like it is okay to fail as well, because they're the moments where we often do have the greatest growth, the best innovations that come about in a business, the greatest leadership moments. So every time we make a brave decision, we're basically giving others that permission to make that brave decision, that it's okay to fail. And I think that is a really fast track means to build resilience.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the point on just how it sounds so basic, but like how every person that you're working with or working for, perhaps it's just that human connection that's so important, and everyone is different. So there's not, like, I feel like maybe 10 years ago the focus wasn't on that as much, as in that real, just, you know, people would have their work hat on perhaps, or their work persona. It's gotten to the, you know, we've all seen each other in our working from our kitchen tables for the last couple of years, and, you know, the common interruptions of family life and other things. So it's just to that point now where you can be really open with your staff as a leader, and you know, share, as you say, keep everyone in the moment, but leading with, I guess, or, you know, really just being authentic as well.
And compassion and care. And I think I read the team members that worked, hundreds of them under Gail Kelly's leadership, called out exactly that, what made her a standout, that was she was smart, talented, innovative, you know, financially savvy, all the things that you need. But she, at the forefront of all of that, was a very compassionate, caring and empathetic leader. And that's what people remembered. That is what people remembered.
Yes, yeah. And I don't know that the Westpac's been the same since she left. She set a very high standard, I think. I probably shouldn't say that. Poppy, thanks so much for today. We're obviously wrapping up our mini-series here, but this resilience one's been fantastic and some great insights for everyone. So thanks so much.
It's always a pleasure, Tom. Thank you for having me.
Take care.